I am completely powerless over alcoholism in my loved ones. I was so bitter. I was so angry. I was so resentful and blamed him for everything. I had no nurturing as a child. I had no love. And what I wanted, those people couldn't give me. Jenny learnt from a very, very young age to be a carer, to be a fixer, to do as I was told, to be submissive. I've replaced the bitterness with love. I've replaced the anger with compassion. I've replaced the arrogance with non-blaming. I've replaced the dishonesty with honesty.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode, I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Jenny. Hi spiritual seekers, welcome to this new episode of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. I'm always really excited when I have a guest from a different fellowship than my own, because it allows me to grow in understanding and to walk in someone else's shoes. We have a member of Anon here today, so it's particularly relevant because it's about those people whom we have heard as addicts and alcoholics. Jenny, I'm so glad you're here today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. My name is Jenny R, and I'm an incredibly grateful member of Anon, the Anon family groups.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's just very quickly, for those people who are not that familiar with it, have a word about Anon and essentially, what it is that you're powerless over. I mean, your step one will have a powerlessness included. So if you'd like to just enlighten us very quickly about the specifics of this.
I am completely powerless over alcoholism in my loved ones. My loved ones that I have born to this world, I am today totally accepting of the powerlessness I have over them.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Let's get to our questions. The first of the 12 questions that I ask every guest I have here is, Jenny, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
None, as I thought I hadn't. As a child growing up, I was in a family, a very large family, a very Catholic family. I was brought up in a religion. In my working my 12 steps, I understood that as a child, I was deprived. Sadly, I was deprived of love. I was deprived of just knowing boundaries, or of just I was deprived, not from my father, from my mom, who I've since found out was an adult child. Sadly, I never knew the name of her father, but I knew that there was alcoholism in her family. And I understand today that deprived meant that not that she didn't love me. She did the best. Oh my God, did she do the best? Altogether, there were 8 of us, including my mum and dad and 6 brothers and sisters. And,
wow.
And she did the best she could. And today I have, oh my goodness, I have laid all of that to rest because of these 12 steps. No doubt whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Take us back a little bit. I mean, you are from the UK, obviously. Where are you from? And tell us a little bit about the time that you were born in. And it's a large number of people in one family, so that must bring its own challenges. I came from a place called Middlesex, just on the outskirts of London. Mm-hmm.
And I was born into a very, very large family. We were 8, and we as a family, when we got together, we didn't need to invite outsiders because there were too many of us, because my dad had so many. My dad was one of 9, so there was a lot of people in the family. But what was interesting now, as a child, I can remember physically having that sense of what now I call the God of my understanding, but right. I had no idea. Because it was brought up. But then as I got that bit older, I realized I was just born into a family of fear. My religion, as I was built on by fear. And I now know that's completely different, which I hope I will be able to explain later on.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for his program. So as a small child, I was always kept off school because I'm just very dyslexic. I couldn't read and write, all those things. And my mum would keep me at home to look after my dad because my mum had to go to work because my dad was quite often ill.
Right.
So Jenny learnt from a very, very young age to be a carer, to be a fixer, to do as I was told, to be submissive, do this, do that. And that's what I was brought up in. And my mum, God bless her, I had 4 brothers, and they were the most important people in our family. And that's me looking as a child growing up without ever having any hugs, ever, sadly. But my dad was different. My dad taught me so much. And I just go back to those wonderful days, and they were wonderful when I think of how we all used to get together and be happy. But there was always that dominating fear of being, you have to go to church, you have to do this, you have to do that. I was brought up in that, even at school.
Yeah,
that's how it was.
From an early age, therefore, you learned to be the parent of your parent, by the sounds of it.
Absolutely correct.
This cuts a bit closer to the bone than maybe I was expecting in some ways. My mother relied on me emotionally, right? My dad was always at the house, was working 10 jobs at a time, and, that sort of setup. And my mother, therefore, and I was quite a sickly child, so I was at home all the time. And my mother would always lean in on me emotionally, right? Way beyond what I was actually capable of digesting or really making sense of, right? Things that she had trouble with, people at work, this, that, and the other. And I'm like 8. Right, so I don't really actually get any of this. And it hasn't done me any favors. Now, I've got a different relationship with this situation now after years of therapy and, of course, going through the steps and understanding, other people's unwellness, other people's sickness. But at the time, it was difficult. And I'm sure it must have been very difficult for you. You talk about being submissive. It sounds to me like there was zero awareness. Of course, there wasn't because you were so young. What was that like, though? I mean, in sort of daily life, you're looking after your father. What did that exactly look like for you?
For me, now I can see, looking after him, the relationship that I had with my dad. When I got older, my mum would say, you need to talk to your dad. He needs to do this. He won't do this. And that was me still caretaking, even then. And I was in my 40s by then, I think, or maybe late 30s. But the bond was there with my dad, and it was there with my mum because my mum knew that she couldn't get through to him, but maybe I could, and he would listen, bless him. And I think it's because of the way that bond, he taught me so much. My dad taught me to cook. He taught me to clean, because on a Saturday morning, my mum would go to work. And we would clean the house because, when there's a lot of people in the house, you either live in chaos or some sort of organisation. So I learned those skills from my dad. And I used to love that. And there's that bit of the caretaker, the fixer, I can do that, Dad, or I can remember as a very young child, I must have only been 5 or 6, my mum standing at the back door. And we got a flood along the side of our house. So I'm out there, honestly, in my bare feet, no wellies, because I didn't have any wellies. They were a luxury. In my bare feet and a broom and sweeping all the water away to please my mum. So what was I? A chronic people pleaser. They are embedded in me from a very, very early age. And of course, I knew nothing of this when I came into my 12 steps, because I didn't come in. And I say it I need to rephrase that. I didn't join Anon until I was 63 years old. So I had a lot of rubbish, a lot of rocks in my rucksack that I could not drop. I couldn't drop those rocks. They were hung around my neck. and backhand from, and they weren't little, they were big. So for me, that's what it was all about.
That's fascinating stuff. Let's move to our question 2. So here you are, you're growing up, you have a special relationship with your dad. You're a people pleaser, you're looking after your parents in one way or another. When I was a child or in my teens, there was no awareness around any of this sort of, or very little awareness around this. So I'd imagine that for you, there'd be even less awareness around this. It was just you made do as a family, didn't you?
Yes, I was told, you're in my house, you do as you're told. That's how it was in those days. And there was never any compassion. There was never any explaining. And lots of things when I look back now, not so many good examples. The examples to me were fear.
Right.
I'm now recalling the first time, or one of the major first times, I must have only been 4 or 5, I would go to church with my dad and I would sit beside my dad, because if you can imagine, there were 8 of us and all of us used to go in a great big long row, which everyone knew who we were, which was quite funny now. I can smile at that and think, it makes me warm. And I remember the priest on the altar screaming and shouting and thumping, and I used to jump in fear at a very young age, and know that that's what I have to do. If not, you'll go to hell. You go into purgatory as that was a small child.
Yeah.
And that's what I can remember. That's the first real memory that I had.
It's quite a powerful memory to have.
Sure is.
Yeah. So, to sum up, you grow up in an age where there is no awareness around any of these issues. You make do with what with what you're given. You're a chronic people pleaser. I'm quoting you here. You're a chronic people pleaser. You've got a special relationship in inverted commas with your dad. You look after your dad, and your main role is to fix things and to be useful. Right? There's very little self left if we. Absolutely. Our question 2, and we need to modify it just a little bit here, but our question 2 is, what did the moment you first got hooked / the fun times look like? Now, this usually would be for an alcoholic or an addict who goes out, starts using some drugs, get out of their heads, have a good time and party. Now, of course, for people with behavioral issues, that's not quite the way we look at it. But something must have come in at some point that does something for you, as I always say, as the book says, that you could not do for yourself. What was that, and how did that manifest?
Believe it or not, it was in a pub, because my parents didn't drink. I was brought up in an alcohol-free home, and they were very, very proud. They had little badges. Then they took from the age of, I don't know, at school, I think, where they were forgotten what's called now. They were abstinent from alcohol all their life. Even at our weddings, they never ever drank.
Like a teetotal badge type thing.
Yeah, that's the one. And it'll come to me. So it's my old age. I've forgotten, but I can see it. It'll probably come to me. And they took a pledge. That's the word. They took a pledge never to drink at quite a young age, I gather. I don't know what age, because I remember my dad telling me about it. But it was a long time. So that I remember going into a pub for the first time. And I was probably 16, 14, 15, 16. I couldn't have been any older than that. I remember meeting up because I friends that I had from school, and my thing was to go horse riding. My escape, there's my word. I've never thought about it as that, but my escape was my horse riding. On a Sunday morning, I'd get all my gear on. I'd get my dad's bike. I never had a bike. I used to borrow my dad's bike, and I used to have to go to church first of all in my riding gear. And then I'd go off. And my lovely friend Elizabeth and her mum, God, did they look after me. They took me in. They loved me. They loved me how I wanted to be loved. That's interesting. And from that moment in that pub, which was interesting, I found freedom. And I did drink, but I'm blessed today to say that I don't have that addiction, but boy, do I have other addictions. I acknowledge that today. So, and therefore, I can remember meeting, I think, probably my first love. And I remember that. And then there's more to come after that. So, yeah. But I remember that feeling.
We can talk about meeting your first love and maybe the first time that you came into contact with the thing that would then later become your problem, right? So if I look back at my own addictions, most definitely the first time I, drank alcohol, the first time I used certain drugs, first time I smoked weed, and most definitely the first time I took a stimulant, right? Those were sort of milestones for me, and they occurred pretty early on, I think around the age of 13, 14, and then a bit further down the line, How was that for you? How did that manifest, around those ages maybe, or a bit later, that this, which gave you problems later, would come about in its first instance?
I can really relate to that, because the love of my life, the first guy that ever gave me any notice, and I remember the first time, I can remember to this day what he said, and what I now realise was that he was terribly controlling. I used to have to do as I was told, with him even, and I can relate back to that. And I was definitely 16, and I sadly not really, but I became pregnant at the age of 17 and a half with this particular person, and that person completely disowned me. There were other things that he was doing, other things with other people. And I thought this person was my world, because this person, I thought what he had was love. It was not. It was absolute control. I was attracted to him because I felt that he was safe. He knew what he was doing. He drove a car. He was a few years older than me, all that stuff. So I then became pregnant with my beautiful son. At the age of 17 and a half, I had to leave work. I had to stay at home. I wasn't allowed out for 2 to 3 months because I was pregnant. My dad would shows you how, my dad would come home in his lunch hour to make sure that I was all right. God, when I think about that. Yeah. And then I had to go away in a mother and baby home. Never left home in my life. The fear started then. I can see that, the fear of leaving home. I have that fear. And I had to go into a mother and baby home. I'm 9 months pregnant nearly. I'm working in a laundry, seriously scrubbing away, because that's what I was good at. I knew what to do. And I met I could see this beautiful nun today. I see her beautiful, soft face, so caring, and giving me love that I never had. But so I had my son where I was, and then after 2.5 months I had to give him up for adoption, and that's where my pain, and that's where all my hurt, I think, started. And I never knew that until I started my 12-step work, and I looked back, and so that pain. But the beautiful thing was, I found my son when he was 39 years old. He's now 60, so that is, he was the most beautiful son. And I'm so grateful he calls me mum.
It's very moving, Jenny. It is very, very moving. But if you could, and I'm so pleased, obviously, that that you found him again, and there's a full circle there, and that you have a relationship with each other, and this is not a given at all. But if we go back ever so slightly to that time, what is a mother and baby home?
Okay, well, yeah, that's a good point. So sorry, because I think everybody understands a mother and baby home is where you leave home, as I was at a 17-and-a-half-year-old, and a long, long way from home, the other side of London. And it's a huge, great big old house, and it was run by nuns, and there were bedrooms galore, and I was put in bedroom right up the top of wherever it was. And then when my child was born, I was brought down a little bit, and I was given a really good job. I didn't work in the laundry then. I was upgraded, if you like. I went and worked in the nursery, and I absolutely loved it. Of course I did, because it's what I did. It's what I was good at. So all that, but so much happened for me to understand then about my religion, when I got back from having my son, and I was summoned to the office of the Reverend Mother, and there she was pointing her finger at me and shouting at me, a 17-year-old just had a child, to go down into that confessional box and make a confession. And I was so frightened. I can't tell you that fear. I just ran. I couldn't do it. I could not do that, because I knew I then thought, I believed that I would be in hell, and all that goes with that, all that doctrine that was there.
Yeah.
And when I think about it now, I can tell you every bit of what was in that room, where this person was, that all that is still in my head. But today,
sort of apocalyptic event, really, in some ways, you know, if that is your entire world.
Yeah, and that was only in the 60s. And when you think about it, I was in, and only 2 years ago did a most beautiful Anon friend say to me, someone that I could share I'm open about this now. I don't have a problem. And she said, "Well, you given any pain relief?" And I said, No. I was just told to literally shut up, being shouted at, shut up. When it was all over, I was then put into a ward with lots of other ladies with babies, and my curtains were drawn round the whole time, because I was a one-parent mum. I'd had a child out of wedlock.
You were shunned.
I was, indeed, sadly, but that doesn't happen today, thank God.
Not in this part of the world. It doesn't, no. But, you know, women are still subjected to this, sadly, in other parts of the world.
They are indeed. Yes, thank you. Thank
you for sharing that, Jenny. It is very moving. Well, how would you say, slightly off script, how would you say does this relate to what you then later came to understand to be an addiction? What part of this do you think is relevant here for the addictive side, for the Al-Anon side?
For me personally, obsession. I have to prove to everybody that I am a good person. That for me, and I did not believe in Jenny at all. I had no belief, none. I was that chronic people pleaser. I was always trying to please my mum, trying to please my dad, trying to please my siblings, in caring, because that's all I knew.
Thank you, Jenny. Quite honestly, I often say it is very clear that I am absolutely powerless over cocaine and alcohol. There's no two ways about that. It is glaringly obvious, even though I tried for a long, long time to deny it and live in delusion, right? But it is also true that there are parts of me and some sides of me where I think I could perhaps qualify for a whole host of different fellowships. I always say on a bad day, I qualify, for a whole host of different fellowships. And, certainly what comes in, I do away meetings here and there, and SLA would certainly be one as well. But by the sounds of it, certainly in terms of people pleasing and in terms of looking after, particularly people from, my mother, I definitely also have a side that would probably earn a place in Al-Anon. So this is because we're not just one thing, are we? We are many things, and therefore this is really relevant. Not just for you, but very much for me, and hopefully also for the listeners out there. Our question 3 is: what were your worst consequences and finally your rock bottom? And we can just really sum this up as in, how did it progress for you to then eventually, at the ripe old age of 63, if I remember it well, coming into the rooms?
Yeah, that's a long gap. And for me, the consequences were fear. I met my first husband when I was 22. And I married him when I was 25. He was the alcoholic in my life. I'd never met anyone that drank ever. But I thought he loved me because he reminded me so much of the first guy I ever fell in love with at a very young age. And he dominated me. He took over, and that was okay. I was submissive. And I would listen to what he say, and we would go to the pub every single night because I didn't know any better. So I married him, and even on the day that I got married to him, I knew deep down in my heart that, the gut feeling that I now call my inner higher power, I didn't listen. I knew that what I was doing wasn't really right. But I was never given any courage ever as a child. When you're at school like I was a nobody, and I mean that, absolutely nobody. I wasn't allowed in classes because I couldn't read and write. What are you doing in here? Out you go. Or you'd get a rubber thrown at you, a thing that you wipe the board with, and they'd throw it at you because you'd be petrified the whole time. So all that, when I get somebody who is, I think, wow, this person is really that person. They're strong. They love me. And that's what attracted me to him. And I think I think now that I was attracted to him apparently because he wanted a child. He was 7 or 8 years older than I was. He's that older person. And I had told him I'd had a child. And I gather now, to speaking to my children, that that's really what he wanted. And he knew that I could have, I know that might sound a bit bizarre, but he wanted children. And so I was attracted to that dominance of his, even at 25. And what was interesting, which I will share with you, I don't know if you can put it in, but I then became pregnant with him. And I had to have an abortion. And it's taken me years to talk about that. It's taken me these 12 steps. It's taken me 5 lots of step 5 to talk. And I can count them because I've been doing them for 11, 12 years and being honest and open. And of course I did do that, but I was petrified. I was petrified of what my dad would do to me or the family would do to me, because here I was at the age of 17 and a half. I'd had a child, and here I was pregnant again. And that's before I got married. So we sorted that out. And then I remember the very night, I can tell you exactly where I was. I was on the Charing Cross Road in London, and I thought I should not be marrying this person. I had no courage. I had no self-worth. Can you imagine? Because when you're in a family like I was told, and then my mum would blame me because my dad became ill because of me having a child, the worry, which I understand, all that blame, if you like, and I took it all on. So there's a huge pattern here, isn't there? There's a pattern of me having no self-worth, no confidence, no belief that I was any good at anything. I couldn't even join the netball team because I didn't know my left and my right. And I have a sister who taught me that, and she taught me to play netball, and I was blooming good at it. I was really good at it. I remember that's the first thing I can remember thinking, God, I'm all right at this. I can do this. And slowly. But yeah. And so I met this, my first husband, through a friend of mine, a friend of my sister's actually.
Did you think at the time, bloody hell, this guy drinks quite a bit, or did you not?
No, I had no clue because my parents didn't drink. I was so, honestly, I just thought it was the norm for him. And this is the truth. When I married him, I thought, once we get married, it'll all stop. I was 25 years old, and I was that naive. It got worse.
Yeah, being naive is not a crime. And yet, sometimes we endure punishment for it, Now, how did it then progress? I'm assuming he turned into a full-blown alcoholic.
Oh, yeah, he was. He had to drink every day when but I didn't realise that. So believe it or not, from that age of 25 to the age of 63, I wasn't in any program. I had the most amazing friend called my best friend, Margaret. She was in Anon. She'd been in Anon for 34 years. And she was my best friend for 47 years. So she knew my ex-husband, she knew my children. And I gather when I came into Al-Anon at the age of 63, she went, oh my God, I've been praying for you to come in for years.
Now, I have, when you do what we do, when you're in the rooms, you become this lightning rod in a way, I always like to think, right? And that's my experience. People know about it, they will come to you and they're naturally drawn to you, and they will say, oh, I've got this friend who's got this issue, my brother drinks too much, my sister does, or whatever it is, right? And there are people in all of our lives, whom we really hope that they will come into the room soon, right? But you have had someone as your friend, possibly as your confidant, really.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, who waited.
She wouldn't be my sponsor because she knew me too well.
Yes. But she waited and prayed for 40 years or something. That's remarkable.
And she gave me the gift. She gave me that gift. She gave me so much because she talked about spirituality. She was a Catholic as well. And so I learned from her. I can remember trying to read one day at a time, which is right in front of me here. I've got my whole row of books here, Anon, one day at a time. And she had a little one and I couldn't read it because I have to have I have a large print. And I remember throwing the book in anger at her, not at her, but in her home. I can't read this. And now there isn't a day goes by when I have to pick that book up and read it.
Let's go back to your ex-husband, his illness, and how that progressed. What was life like for you being powerless over his alcoholism?
It was frightening. Absolute gut frightening. Fridays, I hated Fridays. I had nothing. He controlled all the money. He controlled me. I had 2 children with him and that I am eternally grateful for. I have 2 beautiful children. So his alcoholism got progressively worse. I can see that now. I didn't know any of this. I tried everywhere. I went to my priest. I went to the doctors. My friend Margaret, who was a nurse, who I told you about, she tried to help other people. He wouldn't listen. And I understand that today. I have absolute love and compassion for that man today. I nursed him for 6 years before he died. Literally. Because my daughter was away working, my son was in another country working, and the only people he had was myself and my present husband, who we are all friends. Anon brought me together with the compassion that when I think about the anger and the bitterness and the hate and the resentment that I had towards him, I am truly, truly, truly sorry.
Can we, though, for those people maybe who are listening who haven't found the steps and the healing that you have found so far, talk a bit more about the anger, the bitterness and the resentment that you felt in those days. A bit like, as much as we, I understand that, we found a solution, we found, healing and the light and so on, at least on most days. And sometimes we don't want to go back, but it is important, I think, that we do go back here and there and just shine a light into that darkness. So what was that like, the resentment, the bitterness? We're talking about, decades here, first and foremost, but also the outside world sees you as a do-gooder, don't you? So there is also a payoff in that. So there must be quite a lot in there. So if you don't mind, talk to us about that.
Those days of me being so frightened of hanging on to my son, who was only 8, 9, 10 months old, and my daughter, and we would huddle in the corner on a Friday because we were so frightened of how we would come home. And that was fear in me, which I then projected into my children. The harm that I had done to my children and their dad, and I would scream and shout because I did not know any better. I would argue with him when he'd been drinking, and I didn't know any better. So that got progressively worse. I would want to go down. I lived in the Midlands, and I would want to go back down to home which is on the outskirts of London. And he wouldn't let me drive. I used to take my children. He would go to London and he would drink with where he did, and then he'd come back and pick me up, and I would be petrified. And that fear projected into my children from a very, very young age. I now understand that the harm that I did, but also the harm that his dad did to them as well. And he never found sobriety ever. And that then became okay with me because there were so many years of me learning in Al-Anon to understand that he had a disease. I had a disease. I have a disease of obsessiveness, of saying, there but for the grace of God. I don't have the disease of alcoholism, but I have many other isms. I can see today.
And so, am I right in assuming that as his disease progressed, your disease progressed equally? And that can only really lead to disaster. I mean, there is no other option.
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
I remember in 2019, just before lockdown, he was very, very poorly. And I'd been away on a spiritual weekend, and I needed to come back on the Sunday. And I took him to John Radcliffe Hospital, and they did some procedures on him. He was there for a whole week. I used to travel all the way from the Midlands to Oxford to see him every day, which was amazing. He was so grateful. It wasn't grateful. I just wanted to make my amends to him because of my behavior. And by showing him that this is me understanding now, by showing him that I was compassionate, that I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't blaming him anymore. I was taking responsibility for my side, for my part that I played in everything. He became so different. He couldn't stop drinking, and in the end, he died from his alcoholism. And we were there as a family because of Al-Anon, who my daughter very rightly pointed out, my goodness, Mum, you are the peacemaker today. In other words, you're not the screaming abdab mum that you used to be, that she remembers.
You're looking at it through the lens of today, or at that time, through the lens of Al-Anon and through that prism. And I was just trying to, perhaps we could just for a moment go back there.
Yeah.
To your everyday, when you weren't in Al-Anon yet, and you were just basically at the mercy of someone else's alcoholic whims.
Absolutely.
How did that make you feel? How did that, on a daily basis, I mean, again, we're talking about decades, how did that make you feel, and what did that look like? For those people who are not there yet, to get perhaps some recognition to go, oh my God, my life looks like this.
I can remember the first time I actually physically went to Al-Anon. And that was in 2008. My daughter rang me so distressed. She was getting married. And she said, Mum, what are we going to do? I want Dad to walk me down the aisle. How are we going to keep him? How are we going to stop him drinking? And this is how naive I was. I thought, okay, I'll go to Al-Anon. I'll get that list as everyone comes in wanting that list of what to do to stop them drinking. And it was nothing to do with that. And also I learned to stop blaming him. That was, for me, was a crucial thing.
Is that then what the experience of people coming into the rooms of Al-Anon? They come into the rooms, or some people come into the rooms because they want to find in there the solution to stop their husband, wife, father, mother drinking?
Absolutely, 100%. Everyone that comes into our meeting, and I'm very blessed to be able to say I do 4 a week, 2 face-to-face, 2 on Zoom, and many other things. And they come in thinking that we're going to give them a list. And I am a slow learner. It took me a long, long time to understand that I was controlling me, who I thought was, very submissive. I was controlling. That came later because of my youngest, who is affected from his alcoholism.
Thank you. Lots in there. Really valuable message. Thank you. Question 4. At your worst, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
No, but I do remember one evening, and this was way before Al-Anon, because I do have a higher power. I understand that higher power today was my divine mother. And she has been with me all of my life. But the God of my understanding was completely different. So I can remember I was in my house, my ex-husband we'd had a real bad time. And I remember going to the top of my stairs and kneeling down and asking God to help me for the first time ever in many, many years. Because I had no faith. It is all, well, the bits that I had, I now realize had gone. I had no belief because I was obsessed with trying to stop this man drinking.
Right.
And to the detriment of my own, my own well-being. And I couldn't see it. I didn't think I deserved it for a start.
Really interesting, isn't it? That obsession of wanting the other person, of stopping the other person drinking or using. That is what it boils down to, isn't it? So I remember thinking a lot of the time during my active addiction, all right, I really shouldn't use today. It's Tuesday. I had a big weekend, this, that, and the other. Maybe if I can put it off till, say tomorrow, it'll look more respectable, this, that, and the other. That would be the sort of obsession that I would have, right? Or, if I can just start using a bit earlier and then I might finish early and those sort of things. Those were my thoughts. So your thoughts were, if I try this, maybe he'll stop drinking. If I try that, maybe he'll stop drinking.
Everything will be all right.
Yeah.
But that was not the case.
But it never occurred, of course.
Sadly, no. And in 82, I think, I left home. I left the house that my children were born in, and we had to start all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a one-parent family, as they called it in those days. I think they perhaps still do. But those 6 years were awful. They were dreadful because I was so bitter. I was so angry. I was so resentful and blamed him for everything. Now I see that as I do a very small part. What happened, I had no nurturing as a child. I had no love. And what I wanted, those people couldn't give me.
No.
Now today, I know what I've got is because what I've got in from the God of my understanding. It's here in my heart. I know that. I'm secure in that today. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does to me. Absolutely. Our question 5 is, what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms? Now, let's talk about sobriety in Al-Anon quickly. I don't know, you must use a different word, I'm assuming, and so on.
We use that. I use spirit. I was desperate to find spiritual sobriety.
Right, that is what it's called. Okay, amazing. And, well, what other methods did you try to find this spiritual sobriety? Because you held out for quite some time.
A very good question. And from when I went in, what happened, at the time I went in 2008, 08, and then 29, my daughter got married, and I was living in Southern Ireland. I wasn't living in England. I'd moved. And that was another side of the story that I haven't, so much resentment from both my children about me moving and leaving them. You
did a geographical, in a way.
I did, absolutely. Yeah. And had to start all over again. Absolutely, with my present husband, because he had issues with alcoholism as well, my own present husband.
Right.
And I never knew that. My second husband was a binge drinker. And I didn't know that was a problem until, again, I hadn't been in Al-Anon. I was in my 60s. That's when I went to my first Al-Anon meeting there. I didn't find anything. I was going around and around for 4 years. And at the age of 67, I retired. I left Ireland. We moved back here as quick as that. Now I can see how difficult and the disaster, because I had an amazing job, and everything just went. And for 4 years, this is when I retired. I remember being at the top of the top and sliding all the way down to my first, what I thought was the worst, rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know there was more to come. So that was because I'd retired. I was looking, and that's when I went and joined my first Al-Anon meeting, proper Al-Anon meeting here in England. And that was in 2012. So I came into Anon. There's that word. I came in. So I started to understand when I got a sponsor that I'm in Al-Anon. I was going round and round and round the circles for 4 years, doing nothing, just doing nothing, blaming everybody but myself. So then I started doing my 12 steps. For me, that first bit about finding it was in step 4. It was miraculous for me. I didn't know it at the time. I just did what I did, and I've been looking for years, all my life, for what you've just asked me. What was I looking for? And did I know it was in me? No. I thought everybody else had it. I had to be like them. And suddenly with Al-Anon, I've learned that what I have is within me. I have been given the gift of desperation, the gift of bitterness, anger, resentment, all of those, as I call it, my Swiss cheese, and all the holes were, oh my God, what happens if all this goes? What do I replace it with? Of course I replace it with all the amazing principles of AA. I am profoundly grateful to AA.
That's great.
Because I remember going in to my first open AA meeting. That's where I found compassion for my first husband, in those very, very rooms.
So going to an AA meeting allowed you to see his side, his powerlessness, witness his powerlessness and the fact that he didn't choose this life. And that obviously helped with your own bitterness.
Unbelievably so, yes. And that for me was the beginning of my starting to find emotional sobriety.
Right. Mm.
Let alone, and the spiritual came later. Definitely. I thought I had it, but it came on my second massive big. My life became unmanageable, literally. Again.
Our question 6, when you came into the rooms, or when you joined Al-Anon and you started working the program and you're looking at those scrolls, and of course the God word is all over it.
Yes.
Question 6 is, and this bearing in mind that you have I call my issue, I call it a Catholic hangover. It might apply here as well. Question 6, did you struggle with the word God?
Never. And I have recently been trying for years to explain why that is. Why have I never, because I've never, ever blamed God. Because God was the person I used to go to. My divine mother was the person I would go to. And I suddenly realized what I've been doing all these years was those people that I listened to, the priest in the church, the Reverend Mother was screaming and shouting at me, other people in the religion I was brought up, I put those as my God. They were my higher power. And now today, the God of my understanding loves me for who I am.
That insight that you have there, right? That, the people who harmed you, or you felt had harmed you, the Reverend Mother and so on and so forth, and you had some really awful experiences there, right? The fact that they are not God, or your understanding of God, did that fall out of the sky, or did that come over time, right? So did you come in with bitterness?
Came from doing step 11.
Okay.
All right, the miracle of step 11 for me, in this very room, in 2020, my life became so unmanageable. I never knew that. But I had 11 years of Al-Anon under my belt. Mm-hmm. My life became unmanageable. My best friend of 47 years died. My brother died from his, not addictions, but from other stuff. My ex-husband died from his alcoholism. And my son lost everything. My youngest, he lost his marriage, he lost his home, he lost his job because of his alcoholism. Mm. So then my life became unmanageable because after 11 or 12 years, I tried to fix my son.
Yes.
And I call this my grey tunnel, not my black, but grey tunnel. And I had to begin at that grey tunnel, and it has all grooves on it. This is me.
Love this visualization. It's amazing. That's great.
Absolutely. So I'm going in there and thinking, okay. And I tried to fix my son, me, who'd been in Anon for 11 years, knowing. Because what happened was the mum kicked in. I now understand that my mind knew exactly what I should be doing. But what blocked me was my heart. My heart blocked because it was my son.
Would you call this a relapse?
Oh, a big time. The biggest I've ever experienced. Thank you. I've never used that word, but thank you. That's a brilliant word. So I was in that grey tunnel. My friend Margaret had died. She was my go-to. She was my mum.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a mum, but she was. She wasn't there. And I remember in absolute desperation, crying out. I was doing my step 11, but I suddenly realised for the first time in my life, I'd made a real conscious contact with the God of my understanding. The loving God, not the angry God, not the Jenny who da-da-da-da, all that. I suddenly realised for the first time in this very room, on my knees, I learnt that from two-way prayer and meditation. I started doing that in 2020. And what came out of that was that I understood that my son was broken and I wouldn't leave him alone. I was in that grey tunnel. I had to fix him. I'm the carer. I'm his mum. And he's in his 40s. He's screaming at me to leave me alone. And he used to wear a mask. And I used to see the mask, but then one day I saw him without the mask. And I was broken in his own addictions, and I had to listen to him. And I heard a voice. To the day I die, this voice said to me, "Jenny, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And I heard this voice, and I suddenly thought, "Oh my God, thank you. I've tried to fix him. I can't." I picked him up in my hands, picked my son up, and I gave him to God. Literally gave him to God. And that was me making that conscious contact with God. And slowly, after 25 years, I have my son back in my life.
Yeah.
He was away. There was all, I did my step 8 with him. And the language he used was I'm not even going to say that. He just told me to off. It's a bit late, all that stuff. But I kept going. And now I have this beautiful relationship with my son because I love him. And I now understand what it means to love somebody unconditionally. Leave him be. Do nothing. Be still. My books, I've got so many books that I'm in my writing. And sometimes I look at that and think, because I'm dyslexic, oh my God, did I write that? No, I didn't write it. The God of my understanding did.
And speaking of the God of your understanding, our question 7, after whether you struggled with the word God, yes or no, our question 7 is, how do you experience your higher power today?
Oh my goodness me. Okay. I have been given the gift of desperation, came out of that grey tunnel. And one day I was doing, I have to look at my books, but I remember doing my two-way prayer. And as I come to the end of the tunnel, it was a great big circle. And I was stood on this circle, and there was light streaming in on me. I wrote it all down, and I can draw. So I drew a picture. And then sometime later, I had another of myself seeing, and I was sat down, and then my higher power was sat beside me with an arm around me. I actually saw that. So my description of the God of my understanding today is out there. It's love. It is self-love. I have a beautiful saying here. This is from God, I understand. Acceptance is when my heart hears what my head knows. So when they combine together, so this knows and this knows, I am where I'm supposed to be. The God of my understanding I was here, and this is me in the dyslexic thing. God was just above me here.
Yeah, pointing at your head.
Yes. And today, God is in my heart. And I've been looking for years for that peace. I found it.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I have often suffered from this, that the fact that I can intellectually understand all kinds of things, right? And even sort of, and with sort of basic compassion, just kind of walk in someone else's shoes, kind of go, yeah, I can see how this might apply to that person, or how this could be a reality for this person. And it all sounds great and very clever, right? But my own experience in my heart, that's why I often speak about, as far as my own recovery is concerned, of my open-heartedness, not my open-mindedness, because my mind wasn't that closed. Right? I can imagine all sorts of wonderful things or not so wonderful things for everybody. But what is my own felt experience? Language is such a wonderful tool for this in my heart of hearts. What is in there in my heart of hearts? And in my heart of hearts, just around this my questions 6 and 7, the struggle with the word God. In my heart of hearts, what I had was non-understanding and was a whole lot of prejudice, and it was closed. My heart was closed. My mind, not so much, but my heart was closed. So it's a wonderful way here of pointing that out, what you just said, and you made it so beautifully clear between what we think in our heads and what is our felt, actual reality in our heart of hearts. So yeah, amazing. Thank you, Jenny. Our question 8. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I think probably step 8 and 9.
So the amends process, yes.
Yes, making the amends process, because what did I do? I went in like a bull in a china shop thinking, I can fix this and no, it is not. It's by example. It's of a daily making amends daily, which is what I do. And when I think, I actually think, step 2 was amazing. When I came in, I came to believe, I actually came to. And then on step 3, I make a decision every single morning. I now do it 2 or 3 times a day. I make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, because I now understand from that massive experience on my knees in this very room as absolute sheer desperation. I had nowhere to go. I was so distraught from all the loss and bereavement that I found in my life. That's why I was in that grey tunnel. I didn't know which way to go, and I had to go to God. Yeah. There was nowhere else for me to go. And that's what I did. I turned around, but also on the practical side, I have a very, very dear Anon friend. And since 2020, we have been doing our 3 readings. I read with her on a Monday and a Thursday. So I do Hope for Today, I do One Day at a Time, and I do Courage to Change. And we do our new one, which is a little time for me. So I read out loud, and Al-Anon has given me the gift of being able to read. And if there's something I can't read, I say to my friend, oh, what does that say? Because she's reading as I'm reading, and she helps me. I'm not ashamed anymore. That was a huge thing. So looking, doing that side of it, I can say the God of my understanding, Anon has given me, it's made me grow up. It's educated me because I didn't have any education.
Thank you, Jenny. Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
Oh, so many. I think for me, blame, anger, resentment, definitely. Anger was, I used to be so angry, and I would bang things, and what examples I showed my children was so wrong. And I see it mirrored in, especially my daughter. I see so much of me in her, because she has her own. I know she has her own higher power, but she has her own addictions, as both my children do.
Our question 10, what is the best thing recovery has given you? I mean, you sort of mentioned it a moment ago, but maybe there's something in particular, maybe there's one thing either that stands out or something that you haven't mentioned.
No, I think for me, the best thing was I have replaced, that I talked to you about my cheese, my holes, all those character defects. For me, they've been replaced today, and would like to read them from my heart. And it says, I've replaced the bitterness with love. I've replaced the anger with compassion. I've replaced the arrogance with non-blaming. I've replaced the dishonesty with honesty. I have then picked up patience, tolerance, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, surrender. I wrote all these down because I can't remember, because I'm nearly 80 now, and I get I don't have great remembrance, so I had to write it down. And Anon's given me all this, but also AA has given me this. I would not be sat in this very chair talking to you this morning, only but for my wonderful ex-husband. I wouldn't have gone to Al-Anon. And I went because I wanted to please my daughter. There's that chronic plea. We can fix your dad. We did. We got him down the aisle. Oh, he was sober that day, the day my daughter got married.
By the grace of God.
Yeah.
Our question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict? Or in other words, what would you say to someone who comes to see you and says, Jenny, I'm really struggling because my son or my wife is drinking and their drinking is really disturbing me and I want them to stop?
First of all, I would say to them, please think about coming into Al-Anon, finding a 12-step, any 12-step program from my experience. And we, as we say in Anon, we actually don't give advice. We give our experience, strength and hope, of course. And the main thing that we all say is please keep coming back and listen. And then you start to think, well, hang on a minute. That was me. Well, I was screaming and shouting. I was throwing all the bottles away. I was screaming because we have no money. I was doing all those things. Not my ex-husband. My children saw me as the insane one, not their dad. And I would talk very gently and quietly about my experiences of finding my own higher power, because I didn't have one. I had faith, but my faith is so different. The other thing I've left out, what's this most important thing, of course, is I am a sponsor. I've been sponsoring for 8.5 years. That has been my saving grace, because every week, sometimes every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, I'm not joking, I get to redo my steps because I work with sponsees.
Yeah, and my saving grace as well. Absolutely.
So I would say to that person, please come to Al-Anon. And all I can do is give them the information and let them be.
Yeah. Now,
if they're ready.
There's one thing here, because I don't know my way around Al-Anon and all the behaviors as much as that, but how about, you're speaking about your behavior, about the fact that, what you empty the bottles, you're screaming, you're shouting, you're blaming and all of that. What about those people who, instead of doing those things and who are affected by this, those people who enable their loved ones?
Yes.
Rather than fighting them. What about that? Can you shine a light on that?
Yes, I can. I really can enable it, because I see that with my daughter. She enabled her dad to drink because it's what she has been brought up with all her life. And I saw it last Christmas. So I didn't enable them, but both my children had way too much to drink last Christmas evening. And I sat for the first time. It was like a miracle. No, in a very small way for me. I realized that what had happened with my children, that I didn't cause what happened that day. By goodness me, I could not control them. I could not stop them. And by God, I can't cure them, because they just don't want to get well. They are where they are. And my acceptance today is that I love them unconditionally. I didn't used to, but I understand that.
When you say that your daughter enabled your husband...
My ex-husband, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, your ex-husband. What did that look like? How did that manifest?
Very awful. It was difficult for me to keep quiet because I was in Al-Anon. I remember picking her up from the station, and her dad was with us, and we were going off to see her best friend, who, if I got a chance, I'd love to talk to you about that, doing through step 10. But went to her best friend's, and she said, "Look, Dad, I bought you a bottle of vodka." And what was her dad going to do? He drank the bottle of vodka, and he was just the Antichrist at the age of, and he was nearly 80 then. Well, in his late 70s. He died when he was 80. So, and she had and she was so angry with him. She was so angry for his behavior.
Although she had enabled him.
She had no idea. This is what happened last Christmas. She said to my son, make me a drink. So my son did that. And of course, it was double this and whatever. I just walked away. I left them. And that went on all day. And my son was blessed because he's an alcoholic. He couldn't stop. But it was okay. It was awful. It was awful for them.
Yeah.
Because my son was very drunk. My daughter was angry with my son because he was drunk. But she enabled him. But I can't tell her that.
No. But you were able to step away from this whole situation.
Oh, absolutely.
And just let them be, instead of trying to fix it and trying to fix one way and the other way.
No, I said nothing. I said absolutely nothing, did nothing.
Wonderful. Our last question, our question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Oh, what a question. I hope that he will just call me. Oh my God, you've come home. And when I do my two-way prayer, God calls me he calls me his precious daughter. And I hope that's what he will call me. Sorry, that just gets me every time. When that two-way prayer has been getting my saving grace, of knowing that there is a power out there that loves me for who I am. And the most important thing is today I've learned through what I've been given, if I want to keep what I've been given, I have to give it away.
Absolutely.
And God given that to me today. The God of my true understanding has always been there, but I've always let other people be my God. I've made them my higher power because of fear. I don't do that today. And of course, the other 12-step program I'm in is OA. That has been miraculous. Miraculous.
Oh, we'll do another conversation about that one on a different pod.
Yeah, I think I would love to do that. It's really changed my life in 18 months.
Jenny, I could just keep talking to you on and on and on, but we've been at it for an hour and 10 minutes, and it was a very moving conversation. And I have learned so much about not just your condition and the condition of those people who are affected in this way, who are powerless over other people's alcoholism, right?
Totally.
It's really shone a light into areas of my own behavior that maybe I don't want to look at. You know, my enabling and my people pleasing, my wanting to fix everything, right? So this has been personally really helpful for me, but it's also been just such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions, and for shining a light on Al-Anon and being powerless over other people's alcoholism.
Thank you. And all I can say is please keep coming back.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step Fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not-for-profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.